A horse named Arthur stood in a paddock on Whitby Moor on a Tuesday morning in October 2041, and an old man named Gareth Llewellyn rested his forehead against the horse's neck and did not move for a long time. The mist was burning off. The kettle was whistling in the farmhouse kitchen, and on a small screen mounted to the paddock gate, a graph was showing something that Gareth had not known how to ask and Arthur had not known how to say. The graph showed 3 years of fatigue data. It showed that Arthur, who was 26 years old and had worked this farm since he was 4, had been hiding his exhaustion since the autumn of 2038. He had been pretending he was not tired. He had been pretending for 3 harvests, through 3 winters, across 1,097 days of work. He had been pretending because Gareth needed him to keep working, and Arthur had known. This is not science fiction. Or rather, it is not science fiction for much longer. Horses have been working alongside humans for 6,000 years. For most of that time, the only way to know if a horse was suffering was to watch him suffer. A horse with a stone bruise will walk on it until he cannot. A horse with early colic will stand quietly until the pain becomes unbearable. Horses are not stoic because they do not feel pain. They are stoic because in the wild, showing weakness meant being left behind by the herd. Evolution taught them to hide, and so they hid. But the hiding left traces. In 2018, researchers at the Royal Veterinary College in Hertfordshire began attaching accelerometers and heart rate monitors to working horses, building what they called a biomechanical fatigue profile. They discovered that a horse's gait changes microscopically when fatigue sets in, the stride shortens by fractions of a centimeter, the head drops by degrees too small for the human eye to detect, the heart rate variability shifts in patterns that correlate with muscular exhaustion. A tired horse looks fine to his owner. He does not look fine to the sensors. By 2024, the first commercial fatigue monitoring saddles were being tested on endurance horses in Dubai. By 2030, they were standard equipment on police horses in London. By 2038, they had become cheap enough that a 73-year-old farmer in Yorkshire could afford one for his draft horse, mostly because his daughter had insisted. Gareth's daughter, Bronwyn, lived in Leeds and worked in logistics. She had grown up on this farm. She had learned to ride on Arthur's back when Arthur was young and she was 5. She had watched her father work this land alone for 11 years, since her mother died, since the last of the farmhands moved to the cities, since the world changed in ways that left places like Whitby Moor behind. She had watched her father and his horse grow old together, neither of them willing to stop. And in the spring of 2038, she had driven up from Leeds with a monitoring saddle in the boot of her car and told her father that if he would not take care of himself, he could at least let the horse tell him when to rest. Gareth had not wanted the saddle. He had said he knew Arthur better than any computer. He had said he could tell when the horse was tired just by the way he stood in the paddock, the way he took a carrot, the way he sighed after a long day in the traces. But Bronwyn had left the saddle anyway, and Gareth had put it on Arthur anyway, mostly because saying no to his daughter was harder than it used to be. And then he had not looked at the data. For 3 years, the saddle had logged every step, every heartbeat, every microscopic change in Arthur's gait. And for 3 years, Gareth had let the data accumulate, unexamined, because he did not want to know what it might say. This is the thing Gareth had not understood. He had thought he was the one deciding when to stop. He had thought Arthur kept working because Gareth kept asking. But the data, when Bronwyn finally made him look at it, told a different story. The fatigue curves showed that Arthur had crossed the threshold of sustainable exertion in October 2038, 3 years ago. The gait-analysis showed that his stride had been compensating for stiffness in his left hock since the following spring. The heart rate patterns showed the distinctive signature of a horse working through discomfort, maintaining performance through sheer willingness rather than physical capacity. Arthur had been tired for 3 years. He had not stopped because Gareth had not stopped. He had been pretending he was fine because that was what Gareth needed to see. The horse had been protecting the man. That was the thing the sensors had finally made visible. For 1,000 days, Arthur had walked out of the barn each morning and seen Gareth waiting with the harness, and he had stood still while Gareth buckled him in, and he had pulled the cart or the plow or the hay rake across the fields, and he had not shown his exhaustion, because showing it would have meant that Gareth had to face something Gareth was not ready to face. The farm was too big for one old man. The work was too hard for one old horse, and neither of them had been willing to be the one who said so first. Bronwyn found them like that when she drove up from Leeds the following Saturday, her father sitting in the paddock with the screen in his hands, the horse standing behind him with his great gray head resting on her father's shoulder, neither of them moving. She did not ask what the data showed. She did not need to. She sat down on the cold ground beside her father and put her hand on his knee, and they stayed there, the three of them, until the light began to fade. Arthur did not work the harvest of 2041. He spent it in the paddock, eating apples from Bronwyn's hand, standing in the autumn sun, resting. Gareth hired a contractor with a tractor to bring in the last of the barley. It cost more than he could afford and less than he had feared. The farm did not fall apart. The world did not end. And on the first morning of November, Gareth walked out to the paddock without the harness for the first time in 22 years, and Arthur walked over to meet him, and they stood together in the cold, bright air, two old creatures who had finally stopped pretending. The saddle had not told Gareth anything Arthur did not already know. It had only said, in numbers and graphs, the thing Arthur had been saying with his body for 3 years. I am tired. I will keep going if you need me to, but I am tired. And perhaps, in the end, that was all Gareth had needed to hear. Not from a daughter who he could argue with, not from a doctor who he could ignore, but from the horse who had worked beside him for 22 years, who had never asked for anything, who had carried the weight of this farm on his back without complaint. From Arthur, the only voice Gareth could not refuse. Love does not always announce itself. Sometimes it travels for years in the shape of a horse who will not stop, a man who will not ask, a silence that both of them mistake for strength. The censors could not measure love, but they could measure what love had cost, and in the measurement, they made it visible at last. Every tomorrow leaves an echo. Some echoes are made of the weight we carried for each other, quietly, across the years. We will be listening for the next one. Next on Echoes of Tomorrow, the parrot who remembered a language no human could speak.